A black millionaire locked his pregnant wife inside their burning mansion and walked away with his mistress watching the flames. But the fire didn't finish what he started. Beneath the smoke and broken walls, his wife was still fighting for one more breath, one more chance to hold the baby he planned to erase with her. And from that moment on, every secret he tried to bury began dragging itself back to the surface. Before we jump into today's story, take a moment to share where you're watching from. We love seeing how far our stories reach and connect with amazing viewers like you. And if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe so you never miss the new story. Now, get comfortable and let's dive into the story. The fire came for Naomi Zendaya fast, roaring through the kitchen as if it had been waiting for her to strike a single spark. One moment she was reaching for a pan on the stove, and the next the entire room exploded in a flash of orange that knocked her off her feet. Smoke poured in thick, choking clouds. The alarm never sounded. The security door behind her refused to budge. Every exit felt sealed shut. She shielded her belly with shaking hands, instinctively curling around the child inside her as heat clawed at her skin. Her scream barely cut through the roar of the flames. She forced herself upright, lungs burning, vision blurring. Through the haze, she staggered toward the front door, desperate for air, for escape, for help. That was when she saw him, standing outside the gate, illuminated by the fire, consuming the home he promised would keep her safe. Darius Westbrook, her husband, her protector, a rising black millionaire with a perfect public image. And beside him, with her hand resting easily on his arm, stood Imani Rihanna, the woman Naomi had tried not to believe even existed. Darius didn't move. His expression was steady, almost composed, as if he were witnessing something he'd predicted long before tonight. He didn't shout her name. He didn't try to break in. He didn't run for help. He simply watched, waiting for the flames to finish what he had already started. Naomi's knees buckled as the truth tore through her harder than the fire. He wasn't frozen in fear. He wasn't in shock. He was letting this happen. He wanted this. Everything she thought she knew about her marriage cracked open, spilling a terror deeper than the burning walls around her. Why would a man celebrated for overcoming poverty, a man praised for loving his pregnant wife, choose to kill her with his own hands? The smoke thickened, dragging her under. As her body weakened, her mind pulled her back to that morning, the last morning she'd woken with hope instead of dread. A morning when she still believed their life was real, their home was safe, their love untouched. That memory rose through the darkness like a life raft, forcing the story to open where the fire had begun smoldering long before tonight. She remembered walking through the spotless halls of the mansion, feeling strangely out of place in a home the world admired but she never fully belonged to. The marble floors, the glass chandeliers, the quiet rooms, none of it felt like the community she grew up in, where neighbors talked across fences and music spilled out of church windows. In public, she and Darius were the picture-perfect black power couple, the pair magazines loved and donors praised. But inside these walls, she sensed a widening distance. He came home late. His clothes carried someone else's perfume. His phone never left his hand. Every time she reached for him, he slipped a little farther away. Tonight, she finally saw where he had gone. Back in the burning living room, Naomi's breath returned in short, panicked bursts. The fire pushed closer. She tried calling his name, even though she knew he wouldn't come. She knew now that whatever shattered between them hadn't broken tonight. It had broken long before she ever smelled the first hint of gas. She slid to the floor, her strength fading, but a realization struck her like one final spark. If she died here, Darius would win. He would be free. He would reshape the story however he wished, seal her fate beneath the ashes. Her eyes locked on his silhouette one last time. She refused to let him bury the truth. Her body fell still, the flames closing in, but the question burning louder than the fire itself followed her into unconsciousness. Was this truly the end, or was there still a chance she might survive? The chapter closes with smoke swallowing her vision, leaving only the faint possibility that the story was not yet over. Before the fire, before the betrayal, the world saw Naomi and Darius Westbrook as proof that a black couple could rise above everything. Their faces appeared on magazine covers beside stories celebrating success, ambition, and unity. Reporters praised Naomi as the devoted, expectant wife who supported her husband's political ambitions. They praised Darius as a self-made millionaire who uplifted his community. Together, they seemed unstoppable, an image crafted carefully, publicly, and convincingly. But images aren't reality, and reality had been shifting long before Naomi realized she was standing alone in it. Behind the camera flashes and donor dinners, Naomi felt her husband slipping into a different world, one where appearances mattered more than honesty, and prestige mattered more than family. She still baked treats for church fundraisers, still checked in on kids in their old neighborhood, still held on to the softness of where she came from. But Darius had traded that softness for sharp edges. His suits grew more expensive, his statements more polished, and his nights away from home more frequent. He didn't want to talk about the past anymore. He didn't want to talk about them either. What he wanted was control of his image, his campaign, and increasingly, of the narrative of their marriage. Naomi tried to convince herself it was stress, growth, pressure, politics. But the quiet ache in her chest grew louder each time he brushed off her questions. She noticed how quickly he hid his phone when she walked by. She caught unfamiliar names on receipts shoved into his pockets. And one night, on a gossip site she never meant to scroll through, she saw a blurry photo. Darius, at a Dallas rooftop lounge with a woman whose beauty was impossible to ignore. Imani Rihanna, known for running exclusive nightlife events, loved for her confidence, envied for her reach in elite circles. Everything Naomi wasn't trying to be. That image haunted her even after Darius denied everything. The truth, however, was unfolding miles away in a velvet-lit club where Imani laughed as Darius whispered promises he never whispered to his wife. Their affair was months old, built on secrecy and ambition. Imani didn't see Naomi as competition. She saw her as an obstacle, a woman too simple, too pure, too connected to roots Darius wanted to sever. The pressure on Darius only grew. His investments were bleeding money. His debts were hidden but heavy. His political advisors demanded a spotless narrative, one he feared a divorce from a pregnant black wife would destroy. But a tragic hero widowed by fate was something voters could rally behind. Imani knew exactly how to frame it. And when she saw the life insurance policy on Naomi's desk, $3 million, her suggestion came with a cold smile. An accident solves everything. Naomi, meanwhile, was busy choosing a dress for the dinner Darius promised would help them reconnect. She folded napkins, simmered sauces, and set candles on the dining table, believing she was preparing for a night of healing. She didn't know Darius was texting Imani just hours before. Tonight is the right time. The message Naomi received was far simpler. I have a surprise for you. She didn't know those words were a warning disguised as affection. As the chapter closes, Naomi studies her reflection in the mirror, smoothing the fabric over her stomach and whispering to the child inside her that things will get better. Across town, Imani clasps a diamond necklace Darius gave her, admiring the way it catches the light as she murmurs, "Good luck, baby." Neither woman yet understands that the night ahead will decide the rest of their lives. Naomi never suspected a thing when Darius walked into the kitchen that evening with a bouquet of lilies and a soft apology. His voice was gentle in a way she hadn't heard in months, warm enough to crack open the hope she'd been holding on to ever since her marriage began slipping from her grasp. He said he wanted to make things right, to slow down, to come back home not just to the house, but to her. Tears stung her eyes because she wanted to believe him. She needed to. She reached for his hand, thinking they had finally found their way back to each other. But the truth, unknown to her, was that every word leaving his mouth had been rehearsed as carefully as the rest of his plan. Hours earlier, while she slept curled on the couch with a blanket draped over her swollen belly, Darius had walked silently into the kitchen with a screwdriver and gloves. He moved with a surgeon's precision, crouching behind the stove to loosen the gas line until the faint hiss became steady. When he stood, he disabled the smoke alarms one by one, removing batteries and cutting wires. He pocketed Naomi's phone from the counter and tucked it into a toolbox in the garage. Then he tested the front door, locking it from the outside and tugging twice to make sure the reinforced steel would hold. By the time Naomi woke and smiled at him sleepily, the entire house had already become a weapon pointed directly at her. While she set the table and baked his favorite vanilla dessert, believing she was preparing a night of healing, Imani sat 20 floors above Dallas in a luxury hotel room, swirling wine in a crystal glass as the city lights flickered at her feet. Her phone buzzed once. "Everything is ready," Darius wrote. She smirked and whispered into the empty room, "Don't mess this up. It needs to happen before 11. The calm, almost bored look on her face was the clearest sign of how little Naomi's life mattered to her. Back home, Darius kissed Naomi's cheek and said he was stepping out to buy a special bottle of wine he'd forgotten. She nodded, smoothing her dress, eager to believe the night would mend what had broken. While he drove away to secure his alibi, she lit a scented candle to make the space warm and romantic. She didn't know the small flame she struck was the match he had counted on. When she opened the oven to reheat the food, a blast of heat slammed into her like a fist. A thunderous explosion followed, shaking the walls and throwing her hard against the counter. Pain lit up her side. Her ears rang. She coughed but pulled nothing but smoke into her lungs. The kitchen transformed into an inferno within seconds, as flames crawled across the counters, licking their way up the cabinets, swallowing oxygen faster than she could breathe. She stumbled toward the hallway, trying to remember where she'd left her phone. For a moment she thought she'd simply misplaced it. Then panic struck her throat like a tightening rope. She tried the door, but the lock wouldn't budge. She twisted the handle harder, slamming her shoulder against it, screaming Darius's name. Black smoke pooled against the ceiling, descending in thick clouds that stung her eyes and blurred everything around her. Her vision caught movement outside the front window. Through rising smoke and the glare of flames, she saw two figures standing at the edge of the driveway. Darius stood motionless, hands in his pockets, watching the house burn. Imani leaned into him, her eyes reflecting the blaze. Naomi wanted to believe she was hallucinating, that the fire and smoke were distorting her sight, but then Darius tilted his head as if admiring the destruction, and she knew he was here to witness it, and he had brought the woman he replaced her with. Heat pulsed through her skin as she crawled across the floor, her body instinctively curling around her stomach. "Stay with me," she whispered to her unborn child, pressing a wet towel from the counter against her belly. She tried to make herself smaller, to hide the part of her she feared the fire would take first. Her legs trembled as she crawled, her breath rattling. Every inhale burned. Still, she pushed forward until her arms collapsed beneath her. The flames roared louder, drowning out her sobs, and her strength began slipping away. She turned her head toward the front gate one last time. Darius was still there, untouched by fear or guilt. His silhouette barely moved. Then, almost casually, he turned away, leading Imani down the driveway without looking back. Naomi's body went quiet as exhaustion overtook her, but the fire wasn't the only thing pulsing inside the house. Somewhere beneath the collapsing beams, a faint sound broke through the crackle of burning wood, a fragile, broken moan. Naomi wasn't gone. Not yet. She was still fighting, still clinging to a thread of life even the man who condemned her didn't believe she would hold. The question hanging in the smoke was no longer whether she would die, but whether anyone would find her before the flames claimed what little strength she had left. Sirens echoed across the gated community, bouncing off manicured lawns and towering stone walls, but Evelyn Winfrey didn't hurry like the others. She stood at the end of the street with her old dog at her side, watching the mansion burn with the sharp, assessing gaze of someone who had spent a lifetime studying the truth inside flames. Even from a distance, something felt off. Fires had rhythms, patterns, signatures. This one looked staged, too violent in certain areas, suspiciously silent in others. And the man she spotted 3 houses down, Darius Westbrook, didn't move like a husband watching his world collapse. He stood straight, composed, making a phone call with a steady voice before dialing 911. When the engines finally drowned out the roar of the fire, Evelyn narrowed her eyes. No panic, no attempt to rush forward, just a man playing a part. She didn't trust it. Hours later, when the firefighters packed up and police tape surrounded the charred frame of the house, Evelyn's instincts refused to settle. Retired or not, she had spent decades as Dallas's first black female fire marshal, and her gut had never betrayed her. She slipped past the perimeter once the patrol car left its post, knowing exactly where the blind spots were. Her boots crunched over ash and fragments of glass. The air was still hot, tasting of melted plastic and smoke. She stepped deeper into the ruins, expecting silence, but she heard something faint, a soft, irregular sound, a breath struggling through pain. She froze, heart pounding, then followed it until she reached a collapsed beam near what was once the dining room. She knelt, brushed away soot, and saw a body barely recognizable beneath burns and debris but breathing. Naomi's chest rose in a shallow tremor. It shouldn't have been possible. Someone surviving a fire this violent was beyond luck. It was sheer will. Evelyn didn't waste a second. She knew if she called emergency services, The hospital would notify Darius immediately. A man like him, wealth, connections, political ambition could make inconvenient survivors disappear with the stroke of a pen. Naomi needed a savior, not a system that could be manipulated by her would-be killer. She lifted Naomi gently into her SUV and drove north, leaving city lights behind for the thick woods where her late husband had built a quiet cabin years ago. The cabin had no address tied to her name, no modern utilities, nothing traceable. It was the one place she could hide a survivor from the kind of man who would stand outside his own burning home and feel nothing. Through the night, Evelyn worked with a calm intensity. Naomi's burns covered nearly half her body. Her pulse fluttered like a trapped bird. Evelyn cleaned wounds with cooled, boiled water, wrapped her limbs in sterile bandages, and whispered steady encouragement, even though Naomi couldn't hear her. 48 hours passed without Evelyn sleeping, her eyes fixed on the rise and fall of Naomi's breath, terrified it would stop between one moment and the next. On the third night, thunder cracked across the sky and rain began hammering the roof. Naomi convulsed, her body twisting in pain. Evelyn recognized the signs preterm labor brought on by trauma. She cleared a space, grabbed towels and blankets, and prepared for a birth that would test every skill she had ever learned. The wind roared outside as Naomi fought for life inside, and in the dim light of a lantern, Evelyn delivered the smallest baby she had ever held. The infant didn't cry, didn't breathe. The silence broke something inside her. She placed 2 fingers on the tiny chest and began resuscitation, pumping gently, breathing for the child as rain lashed the windows. Seconds stretched into eternity before the baby released the weakest cry, a sound so fragile yet powerful enough to split the storm. Evelyn sagged in relief. The child lived, but Naomi didn't wake. Her body remained limp, her mind trapped somewhere far beyond Evelyn's voice. Evelyn knew she couldn't keep the baby here. Without medical support, the newborn wouldn't survive. She swaddled the infant, tucked a note inside the blanket, and drove through the storm to the nearest children's hospital. She pressed the baby against the warm night shift nurse's hands, whispered a prayer, and disappeared before anyone could see her face. 3 months passed before Naomi finally opened her eyes. Confusion coated everything she saw: wooden walls, soft lamplight, the steady presence of Evelyn at her bedside. And then the truth arrived, spoken gently but with the weight of a hammer. "Your husband tried to kill you," Evelyn said, "and he believes he succeeded." "Wherefore happened?" Naomi's cry filled the cabin, raw and broken. But beneath the grief, a new expression formed. Her eyes sharpened, gathering strength, gathering purpose. The woman Darius tried to burn away was gone. The woman who opened her eyes now was someone he would never see coming. Naomi woke as if drowning in darkness. Her eyelids felt heavy, her breath scraped against her throat, and the first thing she sensed was pain, deep, throbbing, everywhere. Her hands trembled when she tried to lift them, wrapped in layer upon layer of gauze. Her arms were marked with angry scars, her neck stiff from burns, her belly bandaged tightly. This wasn't her body. This wasn't the woman she remembered being. She forced out a hoarse sound, barely a word, barely a whisper. "My baby. Where's my baby?" Evelyn sat beside her, her face steady but shadowed with sorrow. She told Naomi everything: the fire, the sabotage, the locked door, and the moment she had found her under the rubble. Each detail tore deeper into Naomi, ripping at wounds far worse than the ones on her skin. When Evelyn finally said, "Your husband planned it all," the world seemed to tilt. Naomi shook her head, refusing to believe it, but her memory betrayed her. She could still see Darius standing calmly outside the burning home. She could still see Amani leaning close to him. Her heart cracked open all over again. Then came the blow that shattered her. Evelyn told her the baby had been born early and too weak to keep at the cabin. She had taken the child to the hospital in secret, leaving her with a note claiming the mother had died in the fire. It was the only way to protect the infant from the man who had tried to kill them both. Naomi screamed raw, guttural, filled with a grief no language could shape. Her daughter was alive, but she was gone. Gone from her arms, her sight, her world. Naomi wept until her strength collapsed, and even then, tears kept falling from the corners of her eyes, as if her body knew a sorrow she couldn't contain. Days blurred into nights. Naomi drifted in and out of consciousness, waking only to the echo of her own cries. She saw flames behind her eyelids, smoke in her dreams. She relived the blast, the burning walls, the betrayal that tightened like a fist inside her chest. She begged to sleep and begged not to. She asked Evelyn why she hadn't let her die. She said she had nothing left. No home, no husband, no child. She had been erased, replaced with a memory the world already mourned. But Evelyn didn't let her sink. She sat by Naomi's bed and spoke of her own past, of the night she had almost died in a fire set by someone she once trusted. She spoke of waking up years ago, broken in body but not in spirit. She told Naomi that survival was never gentle. It was a battle fought breath by breath. "They meant to destroy you," Evelyn said softly. "But fire can do more than burn. Fire can forge iron." Naomi clung to that sentence, turning it over in her mind until it began to steady her. When Evelyn finally said she had a plan to keep Naomi safe, Naomi felt a faint spark flicker inside her, a spark that didn't yet feel like hope, but wasn't despair either. The plan was simple and unimaginable. Naomi Zendaya had to remain dead. The world needed to believe the fire had taken her. Only then could she live long enough to reclaim what was stolen. It began with a new name, a new identity, a new life not tied to the millionaire who had tried to end hers. Evelyn introduced her to documents, contacts, people who owed her favors from decades in public service. Bit by bit, Naomi learned who she would become. Nia Zendaya Winfrey, a survivor of a different fire, a woman with no ties to Darius Westbrook, no traces that connected her to a past she needed to bury to stay alive. The first time Nia saw herself in the mirror, she hardly recognized the woman staring back. Her scars were still healing, her skin uneven, her hair singed short, her eyes deeper and darker than before. But somewhere beneath the damage, there was strength, something harder, sharper than what Naomi had ever known. Naomi had died in that house. Nia was the one who rose. She whispered a vow to her reflection, a vow shaped by pain and loss, and something fiercer than fear. She would get her daughter back, and she would make the man who betrayed her answer for everything he had done. The fire had taken her life, but from the ashes, she felt herself beginning slowly to stand. Time passed, and with it, the woman who once trembled at the memory of flames began to fade. Nia Winfrey stood taller now, her muscles stronger, her breath steadier. Her voice had deepened into something rougher, weighted by the damage to her lungs, yet steadier than it had ever been. She faced fire the way some people faced mirrors, directly, honestly, without looking away. It no longer owned her. If anything, she owned it. Evelyn guided her every step, teaching her not only how to heal but how to understand the very force that had nearly claimed her life. They studied how flames moved, how gas traveled silently through pipes, how signs of arson hid beneath the debris. The more she learned, the clearer that night became. Each lesson wasn't just knowledge, it was an anchor holding her steady against the storm of memory. She could finally see the truth with sharp clarity. The fire hadn't been an accident. It had been engineered, timed, designed to kill her while keeping Darius's hands clean. As Nia's body strengthened, so did her new identity. Evelyn's colleagues, retired investigators, legal experts, trauma specialists, helped craft a life she could step into without suspicion. A degree in behavioral trauma, certifications in fire safety training, a digital trail of articles and professional workshops. There was nothing about her that tied her to Naomi Westbrook, no matter how closely someone looked. Nia Winfrey could walk into any room and be seen as a woman shaped by hardship, not reborn from murder. When Evelyn finally brought her back into the outside world, Nia felt the air differently. She moved through grocery aisles and crowded sidewalks with both caution and curiosity. The siren of a passing fire truck still made her flinch, but she no longer froze. Fear lived inside her, yes, but no longer as a master, more like a ghost she had learned to keep at her side. Then, one afternoon, everything shifted. She turned on the TV and saw Darius Westbrook standing at a podium, wearing a tailored suit and a sorrowful expression, announcing his campaign for Dallas City Council. He spoke of tragedy, perseverance, community. He spoke of losing his wife, her to a devastating accident. Imani stood just behind him, polished and serene, like a woman who had never watched a home burn with her lover beside her. Nia's hands curled into fists. The man who had tried to kill her was using her death as a stepping stone toward power. Her chest tightened as images flashed across the screen. Darius hugging supporters, shaking hands, smiling with the confidence of a man who believed he had outsmarted the world. But then the broadcast shifted to a charity segment about foster and adopted children. A small girl appeared beside a couple named the Coles, her curls bouncing as she clutched a picture book. Nia stopped breathing. Harper, her daughter. She had grown, healthy and bright, safe in a home that loved her. Nia pressed a hand to her mouth, tears blurring her vision. For a moment, all anger fell away, replaced only with aching love. Evelyn found her like that and knew immediately what Nia had seen. They sat together in silence until Nia whispered, "It's time." Evelyn warned her that the most dangerous place she could go was back into Darius's orbit, but Nia understood something now. The safest place was actually the one where she was invisible. Naomi was dead. Nia was no one to him. They crafted a strategy, studying Darius's campaign needs. He wanted to push an agenda on housing safety, trauma recovery, fire prevention, the very fields where Nia's new credentials made her look indispensable. If she played the part well, she could walk straight into his inner circle without raising suspicion. She trained harder, practiced steadying her breath at the sound of his name, practiced looking at his face without letting memory break her composure. She rehearsed conversations, body language, the cold professionalism she'd need to maintain. She would be close enough to expose him, close enough to dismantle everything he'd built atop her ashes. When the day finally came, Nia dressed in a dark blazer that hid her scars and walked toward the Westbrook campaign headquarters. The building gleamed with the confidence of a man certain of victory. She paused at the door, inhaling deeply. She was no longer the woman he left to burn. She was the woman returning with fire of her own. And when she pushed the door open, she stepped into his world not as his victim, but as the shadow destined to bring it crashing down. The campaign headquarters buzzed with the polished efficiency of a well-funded political machine. Sleek glass walls reflected young staffers sprinting between meetings, screens flashing polling numbers, and a giant portrait of Darius Westbrook smiling confidently down at everyone who entered. No one paid much attention to the quiet woman standing in the lobby, scarred, composed, her blazer buttoned neatly as if holding her together. They didn't know she had once walked these kinds of rooms as a wife. Tonight, she walked in as a stranger. "My name is Dr. Nia Winfrey," she said to the receptionist. "I'm here to apply for the fire safety consultant position." The receptionist skimmed her resume, and her eyes widened as she recognized the value of Nia's credentials. Within minutes, Nia was ushered into a conference room where key staffers circled her with questions. She answered each one with steady confidence, translating her trauma expertise and technical fire knowledge into clear strategies that any campaign would fight to claim. By the time the door opened again, she had already won the room. Darius walked in with the swagger of a man raised on admiration. His suit was immaculate, his posture practiced, his smile curated. He extended his hand with the smoothness of a politician who believed he understood every person he met. "It's an honor to meet you, Dr. Winfrey." When Nia shook his hand, the touch sent a tremor through her chest, not of fear, but of memory. She kept her face steady. His eyes scanned hers, but there was no flicker of recognition. Why would there be? He believed the woman he tried to kill had died screaming beneath a collapsed ceiling. He launched into a polished monologue about public safety, about turning tragedy into action, about strengthening the city he loved. Nia listened, studying the practiced grief in his voice. She recognized the lies he wrapped in compassion, the way his gaze softened when he mentioned his late wife. He had perfected the performance. If she hadn't been the woman he was talking about, she might have believed him too. The door opened again, and Imani Rihanna entered with an elegance that demanded attention. Her dress shimmered under the overhead lights, her hair swept into a flawless wave. She paused mid-stride when her gaze landed on Nia. For a fraction of a second, something like fear or recognition crossed her features, but it vanished quickly, replaced by a polite smile sharpened at the edges. "You're the new consultant?" Imani asked. Nia nodded. "Thank you for having me." Was knowing, they exchanged a handshake that felt more like a quiet duel. Imani's eyes traced the faint line of a scar near Nia's jaw, and Nia watched curiosity turn into unease. There was something familiar lingering behind Nia's eyes, something she couldn't quite place but feared she should. Darius interrupted the tension with a satisfied nod. "I'd like Dr. Winfrey to join our core advisory team. Weekly meetings with me and my wife will ensure our message remains authentic, too." Nia nearly laughed at the word authentic, but she kept her composure. The position placed her closer to him than she could have planned herself. He had just opened the door she needed. In the following days, Naya immersed herself in the rhythms of the campaign. She reviewed building codes, rewrote safety protocols, and quietly collected inconsistencies in Darius's property history. She found files that raised questions, reports rewritten, warnings ignored, recommendations buried. Darius's empire had not been built on integrity, but on loopholes and manipulation. One afternoon, she stepped into his private office to review documents for an upcoming policy speech. A photograph on his shelf caught her breath. Darius, smiling broadly, his arm around a small girl with bright eyes. Harper, her daughter. He held her as though he had earned the right, as though he had not tried to end her existence before she ever took her first breath. Nia's hand tightened on the edge of the desk until her knuckles went white. She forced herself to breathe, to stay present. She couldn't break here. Not yet. When she left the office, she sensed eyes following her. At the end of the hallway, Imani stood with her arms crossed, studying Nia with a stare sharp enough to slice through bone. "Have we met before?" she asked softly. Nia smiled back, a serene expression masking the fire inside her. "I don't believe so, but I'm sure we'll be seeing each other often." As she walked past, she felt Imani's suspicion cling to her like a shadow. The game had shifted. Nia was no longer just a stranger entering their world. She was a threat neither of them could yet define. The Rosewood Dallas ballroom glittered under crystal chandeliers, filled with wealthy donors who had come to sip champagne and buy influence disguised as philanthropy. Nia moved through the crowd as part of the campaign's entourage, her presence quiet but calculated. She had prepared herself for a night of false smiles and political theater, but she had no idea how profoundly this night would shake her world. On stage, Darius delivered his speech with the precision of a man who had practiced his sorrow in a mirror. He told the crowd about losing his wife and unborn child, his voice quivering perfectly on the word tragedy. Imani stood beside him, her hand resting lightly on his back, her expression that of a woman who had supported her partner through unimaginable grief. The audience nodded sympathetically, fully consumed by the story. Nia felt bile rise in her throat. Every sentence he uttered violated her existence. She watched, her jaw clenched, as he used her supposed death to solicit donations, applause, votes. He turned her suffering into campaign currency. Then the room shifted. A small girl appeared near the corner of the stage, holding her foster mother's hand. Harper's dress was pink and soft, her curls bouncing gently as she looked around with innocent curiosity. Nia's breath stopped. Her world narrowed to that tiny figure. She knew that face. She had memorized it the night she gave birth in a storm, the moment Evelyn fought to save that fragile life. Harper turned her head and her gaze locked on Nia. The crowd faded. The music dissolved. Harper stepped forward, as if pulled by something older than memory. She walked past strangers and volunteers, weaving toward Nia with a focus far too intent for a child her age. Then she ran, collapsing into Nia's legs with the full trust of recognition. "You look like the lady in my dreams," Harper whispered, her voice soft and sure. "The one who reaches for me." Tears pooled in Nia's eyes, though she kept them from falling. She knelt slowly, her hands trembling as they rested on Harper's shoulders. She couldn't claim her. She couldn't risk anything that would expose her identity. But the warmth of that small body against hers was a miracle she hadn't dared to imagine. Jennifer Cole hurried over, apologizing as she tried to gently separate them. "I'm so sorry she's never acted like this before. I don't know why she felt drawn to you." Nia offered a calm, practiced smile. "Some connections don't need explanations. It is." Before she could stand, Harper pressed a folded piece of paper into Nia's hand. When Nia opened it, her heart nearly stopped. It was a child's drawing, a woman surrounded by flames, reaching outward with one burned arm, and a tiny girl reaching back. Harper remembered. Somewhere deep inside her, the fire had left an imprint. Across the room, Imani watched the entire exchange. Her wine glass trembled slightly in her hand. Her eyes narrowed, striking at every detail, the scar along Nia's jaw, the tenderness between woman and child, the haunting familiarity she had felt since the first moment she'd met Nia. She stepped out into a quiet hallway and dialed her phone. "Silas," she said, her voice stripped of all composure. "I need you to dig into every detail about Dr. Nia Winfrey. Everything, right now." Nia felt the shift in the air the moment she exited the ballroom. A presence lingered behind her, too controlled to be casual, too deliberate to be harmless. She didn't turn around, but she recognized the danger instantly. Her cover had held for weeks. Tonight, it had begun to crack. Harper's hug, Imani's suspicion. The fire that once tried to kill her had ignited something new. And now, the people who thought she had died were starting to feel the ghost of the woman they left behind. If they're starting to see me, Nia whispered to herself as she walked into the night, then the real battle begins now. The night after the gala felt too quiet, too heavy, as Nia steered her car out of the hotel parking lot. The road behind her was empty at first until a pair of headlights appeared in her rearview mirror and stayed there. The distance never changed. The rhythm never faltered. She recognized the style of pursuit instantly. Silas Denzel, the man who handled the things Darius didn't want to dirty his hands with, the man Imani trusted to erase loose ends. If he was following her, the illusion of safety she'd built was beginning to collapse. She didn't speed. That would only confirm she was afraid. Instead, she took a series of turns that should have confused any casual driver, doubling back, weaving through side streets, slipping through an underpass. But the black SUV stayed behind her, patient and calculating. He wasn't trying to scare her. He was tracking her, trying to see where she went when she wasn't on campaign grounds, trying to find the truth buried inside her scars. She couldn't go back to the cabin. Evelyn would be vulnerable. So she pulled into a gas station, stepped out to pump fuel, and made a show of checking her phone. The SUV parked across the lot, engine idling. Silas didn't get out. He wanted her to know he was there. He wanted her scared. Nia returned to her car and dialed Evelyn with trembling fingers. "They know," she whispered. Evelyn's voice hardened instantly. "Then it's time to stop hiding." They arranged to meet at an abandoned parking lot just outside the city. Evelyn promised she'd bring something that would change the game proof that could trap Darius and Imani in their own lies. When Nia pulled into the lot, she saw only darkness, the hum of streetlights, the distant sound of traffic. Then a figure detached itself from the shadows, broad shoulders, calm stride, a gleam of metal beneath his jacket. Silas. He approached without hurry, like he already owned the outcome. "Dr. Winfrey," he said, his tone almost cordial. "Funny thing, your name doesn't exist anywhere before 4 years ago." Nia backed toward her car, but he sidestepped smoothly, blocking her. He didn't draw his weapon. He didn't need to. His size alone trapped her. "Who are you really? Why does that little girl cling to you like she's known you forever?" His hand snapped out, gripping her arm, shoving her against a concrete pillar. Pain shot through her shoulder, but she didn't scream. She stared him down, her voice low and cold. "You don't know who you're dealing with." Silas smirked. "Then teach me." He reached for her other arm, and that was when something slammed into him from behind with a force that echoed through the lot. Silas staggered, cursing. Evelyn stood there holding a heavy industrial fire extinguisher, her stance steady, her eyes blazing. "You picked the wrong woman to corner," she growled. Together, they forced Silas to the ground, snatching his phone as he struggled. On the unlocked screen were open messages to Imani location updates, photos from the gala, a picture he'd secretly taken of Nia. He'd been tracking her for days. Evelyn tied his wrists with zip ties she'd brought, dragging him out of sight behind a pillar. "This only ends one way now," she said. "We stop them before they stop you." She handed Nia a tiny recording device, no bigger than a button. Voice activated, undetectable. "Get him talking. Make him confess." Nia nodded, adrenaline flooding her veins. That night, she drafted an email to Darius. "I know something about your house fire. Something no one else does. Meet me. Alone." It took less than 10 minutes for him to respond. The next evening, the campaign office was nearly empty when Darius arrived. His steps echoed as he entered the conference room, jaw clenched, eyes sharp with suspicion. "What exactly do you think you know?" he demanded. Nia didn't answer immediately. She let silence settle, feeling the weight of the years between them. Then she spoke slowly, deliberately repeating the exact sequence of actions he had taken on the night of the fire. How he loosened the gas line, how he disabled the alarms, how he locked the steel door behind him. Darius's face drained of color. His hands shook. That was the moment Imani burst into the room, panic twisting her features. A gun glinted inside her purse. "Who are you?" she screamed. Nia lifted her chin. "The woman you left in the flames," she said softly. "And I'm not dead." The recording device clicked on. The storm had begun. The air inside the conference room thickened as panic surged through Darius's expression. his composure shattered. "You can't be her," he stammered, backing toward the table. "You died. I saw." He slapped a hand over his mouth too late. The implication spilled out, exposing everything. Imani lunged toward him, eyes wide, hissed, "Shut up!" Her hand flew to his arm, squeezing hard, not out of support, but out of fear. Nia watched the unraveling with a calm she didn't expect. For years, she had feared this man. Now she saw nothing but cowardice behind the expensive suit and polished smile. She stepped forward, her voice steady. "You loosened the gas line. You turned off the alarms. You locked the door from outside while I was 7 months pregnant. You watched me burn." Each sentence hit him like a hammer. Darius shook his head violently, but the truth hung heavy, undeniable. Imani broke first. "You said the fire would look accidental," she shouted, her voice cracking. "You said we wouldn't actually see her die." Naya's heart tightened, but she forced herself to keep going. The recording device was catching every word, every confession, every crack in their alliance. Darius rounded on Imani, desperation flooding his voice. "You pushed me. You're the one who told me the insurance money could fix everything. You said she didn't belong in our future." "Tenny." Imani's expression twisted with rage and betrayal. "Don't you dare blame this on me. You're the one who locked the door." It was unraveling faster than Naya anticipated. Their guilt no longer needed coaxing, they were handing it to her, fighting each other with the truth they had buried for years. Nia reached into her pocket and pulled out the drawing Harper had given her. She unfolded it slowly, letting the image of a burning woman reaching toward a little girl fill the space between them. "This," she said quietly, "is what you almost destroyed. Harper remembers the fire, even if she doesn't understand why. You didn't just try to kill me. You nearly killed your own daughter." Darius's knees buckled. He collapsed into a chair, hands clutching his head as if trying to smother the truth. "No," he whispered. "No, no, no." The conference room door burst open. Police officers flooded inside, weapons drawn, followed by Evelyn, who walked with a calm authority that silenced the room. "We have your confessions," she said, her voice low but firm. "Every word. You're under arrest for attempted murder, conspiracy, and obstruction." Darius lifted his head, eyes wild. "Please," he begged. "I was under pressure. The campaign, my career." His voice broke as the officers pulled him to his feet and cuffed him. The fall from grace was immediate, brutal. The once celebrated millionaire admired, photographed, envied now stood small and shattered in a wrinkled suit, his legacy collapsing like the home he had destroyed. Imani was pulled in the opposite direction, screaming, mascara streaking down her cheeks. "I just wanted a better life," she cried. "I didn't mean for it to go that far," but excuses couldn't rewrite flames. When the room emptied, Nia stood alone for a moment, letting the silence settle in her bones. Revenge hadn't brought joy, but it had brought clarity. She had survived. She had defended the truth. And now she could finally reclaim what mattered. She drove to the Cole residence the next morning. Jennifer opened the door, confusion easing into warmth as Harper ran forward. "Mommy," the little girl said without hesitation, wrapping her arms around Nia's neck with complete trust. For the first time since the fire, Nia let herself cry full, unrestrained tears that washed years of pain from her spirit. Weeks later, with legal processes settled and restitution granted, Nia opened the Phoenix Center, a safe haven for survivors of violence and fire. Standing beneath the new sign, her short hair moving in the breeze, she touched the scars on her arms with a sense of ownership rather than shame. "I died once," she whispered to herself, "but I rose from the fire stronger." 80 said. The story closed not with flames but with a woman who had learned to build her own light. Life has a way of testing us in moments we never saw coming, yet there's something unshakable inside the human spirit that keeps pulling us forward. Even on the days when everything feels burned down or too heavy to carry, there's always a spark somewhere small, quiet, but enough to build a new beginning if we let it. If you're listening right now, maybe late at night or on your way home, tell me in the comments, what keeps your spark alive when life gets dark? And if you want more stories that remind you you're not alone in the fire, hit subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. We'll walk through the next one together.